So like all of our classes in Bissel of Judaism, this is just an introduction, and think of it as an impressionist painting, a biased overview of an extremely large topic. So we are going to go through some definitions, and and then I have some readings, and I don't know how long. You can interrupt me when I am at any point in my presentation, because there is a lot more behind what I've put into these slides. I did want to try to give you some information that is hopefully written for a more general audience. Most of the definitions will come from one book, which is Introduction to the Zohar by Art Green. And if you're curious for more reading about Kabbalistic mysticism, he is a great resource. He writes in a way that people can connect with. Okay. So the first definition, not from Art Green, it's actually from another small volume that I have called Jewish Mysticism and Jewish Ethics. It's the only other book that's really written from the perspective that I'm writing my thesis topic on, which is that both of these forms of Jewish expression have worked together, and people have written through them at the same time. So Joseph Dan gives this definition of Jewish mysticism. Like any other mysticism, is based on the deep religious belief that divine truth can be neither found nor expressed in worldly terms. Divine truth lies in a mystical realm, completely hidden from human senses and rationalistic analysis. The only bridge between language and the mystical realm of divine truth is the symbol, a term of language which expounds not what is known, but what is unknown. A symbol in a mystical context is the maximum possible approach that language can achieve toward a truth which in itself can never be reached, which lies eternally beyond human understanding and expression. So the reason I like this definition is that it speaks to why this topic is so hard to crack into, and why even at the end of semester-long courses on Jewish mysticism, I've had colleagues who have been as distant from it at the end of the course as at the beginning. So I don't fault you if none of this is of personal interest at the end of our time together. But hopefully it will spark something in you. So here's how mysticism is explained by Rabbi Arthur Green. Mystics share with other religious people an intense awareness of divine presence and a constant readiness to respond to that presence in both prayer and action. For the mystic, that presence is revealed through powerful and transformative inner experiences. Mystical experience, whatever its ultimate source, represents a transformation of ordinary human consciousness. And this, for me, is a beautiful way to express why it is that I keep coming back to this wellspring of Jewish information, that those symbols that are used in Jewish mysticism really help me to realign myself towards the greater good. So the word Kabbalah means either tradition or reception, and it's really rooting itself in the oldest layers of Jewish tradition. So the Kabbalists saw themselves as a conservative element within the Jewish religious community. And Maimonides was an alternative thinker in the Middle Ages. He taught that God has no need for us to fulfill the commandments, and that the chief purpose of religious observance was educational, a God-given way of cultivating the mind to turn toward God. So the secrets of Kabbalah were made public in the mid-12th century as a way to combat the influence of Maimonidean rationalism. And a lot of how I've experienced Judaism growing up, and a lot of the way that modern American Judaism expressed itself, was through the rationalist lens that Maimonides cultivated. So there's a book called the Zohar, and Zohar, the word, means radiance. And here are some ways to understand what the Zohar is. It is, on its surface, it's a midrash on the Torah. Every chapter of the Zohar refers back to a section of the Torah. So Torah is alive with Kabbalistic secrets and veiled references to the mystery of faith. The Zohar wants to take the reader inside the divine life. It wants to ever retell the story of the flow of the Sefirot, their longings and union, the arousal of love above, and the way in which that arousal causes blessing to flow throughout the worlds, rousing the reader from his daily torpor and reminding him of the constant vital flow needed to quicken the cosmos. Now, one of the reasons that the Zohar became kind of a second Bible, a very foundational text for Jewish mysticism, is that it was a Pseudoepigraphia, which is a fancy word for the person who wrote it pretended that it had been written during the time of the Talmud by Rabbi Simon ben Yochai, and modern scholars agree that the majority of the Zohar was written in Castile by Rabbi Moses de Leon in the 1290s. So that last page discussed how the Sefirot are explained in the Zohar. They're also explained in earlier texts, and Kabbalists continue to talk about them. Sefirot are the emanations of the divine. And so part of this is that if you have studied some philosophy, Plato posited, okay, let me stop talking. Shari, please ask your question.
The question is Sefirot from the root Sefer, like book?
It's a different. It's a samach, and it's about counting.
Okay, just playing with my Hebrew class. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, the first book that talked about Sefirot just labeled them as numbers. And so the word itself is referring to the fact that you're counting 1 to 10. So Plato and Neoplatonists understood that to get from the metaphysical to the physical, there was layers of grabbing onto material reality, and that to get from God to the material plane, there is a leveling of more or less holiness. And so in some senses, you can see Sefirot and Kabbalah generally as a Jewish Neoplatonism. That probably doesn't help a lot of people, but for people who study philosophy, it's a way to place it into the larger framework of intellectual work. But the part of that is important to understand is that the Sefirot go from the closest to Ein Sof, which literally means without end. Ein Sof is the unknowable essence of the divine into material reality. And so from Ein Sof, you get to Kater, the crown. From the crown, you get to Chokhmah, wisdom, and Bina, understanding, and they go down from there. Now, as I said in the first slide, that words are symbols. Even describing the Sefirot is just it's touching towards some reality that is beyond words. Okay, so God of multiple mythical potencies, obscure entities eluding precise definition, God as the collective aggregate of these potencies and their interrelationship and their stages or rungs in the self-manifestation of the deity. They do not, Sphirot, do not exist in either time or space. And one of the sources for this system of understanding the map of God is that wisdom comes from nothingness is a quote from Job. And so there's a lot, even before Kabbalah, there was midrash on the fact that wisdom existed with God, Bereshit, before the beginning of creation. So it is also understood as a channel of grace, is the original divine Shefa, excuse me for the typo, the unlimited love of God, reaching beyond philosophy and entering a realm of reality that rational thought was unable to penetrate. Now, I struggled to put together a slide about Sphirot. I didn't want to show you the map that shows all 10 emanations, because then it becomes just a 90-minute discussion of what this Sphirot are, rather than an overview of Kabbalah on the whole. Know that they come in triads, and that the top 3 are generally understood as beyond human interaction, and that the bottom 7 are connected to human aspects of human personality. And when modern day, when people count the Omer, they often are counting it using the bottom 7 Sphirot. And if you are interested in that, I have 5 years of meditations into that counting available on my website. And I'm happy to share that with you. The counting of the Omer happens for the 49 days between the second day of Passover and then culminating in the reception on Mount Sinai on Shavuot. And the reason that Shavuot is named weeks is that it is a counting of 7 weeks between one harvest and another was the original reason for these 2 holidays, but between Passover and the next Chag, Shavuot. Okay, so if I haven't confused you enough, let me confuse you a little more. Kabbalah started with this large book, the Zohar, and there were many different Kabbalists, and then they all found their Rebbe. I mean, Rabbi didn't exist as a frame of reference at the time, but Rabbi Isaac Luria, who was active in Sfat, which is a place of a lot of mystic work in Israel, and he was. He unfortunately didn't have a long life, but he was around 1534 to 1572, and he came up with an mythic understanding of creation, which is the basis of Lurianic Kabbalah that everyone after him agreed to. And so what he was imagining and was that in the beginning, there was only God, and God being so overwhelming, so great, that there could not possibly be any space beyond God, or any ability for anything else to exist because of the fullness and the infinity of God. And so in order to make space for creation, God had to choose to tzimtzum, to do a contraction. And he placed within this space of the space without the divine, kalim, vessels that contained within them holiness. And as those vessels entered into the space without God, they shattered. And Shivira HaKelim, that was the breaking of the vessels. And so from that shattering, there were shards of divinity were trapped in husks, impure spiritual forces known as klipot. So the divine sparks are within everything, and by repairing everything, by repairing ourselves and by repairing the world around us, we lift up those sparks and bring them back into alignment with God. And that is how the phrase tikkun olam came into Jewish culture. It was originally primarily about the fact that there is occluded sparks of the divine within ourselves, that not all of us is pure, and that by working on our own tikkun, by rectifying ourselves internally, we repair the world inside of ourselves. So it became the dominant form of Jewish mysticism. Okay, so a bit after Isaac Luria is when Hasidism began, and it was started by Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer in the Kingdom of Poland. He was born in Poland. The place where he was born is now part of Ukraine. The place that he died is now part of the country of Poland. He was known as the Baal Shem Tov, and the important part of understanding his name is that it means the master of the good name. And people were given this title because they were magic workers, because they wrote amulets that helped people to overcome illness, whether physical or spiritual illness. They also worked with herbs and other forms of medieval medicinal knowledge. So the Baal Shem Tov, the main part of his teaching is that true worship means cleaving to God, which in Hebrew is devekut. Man forms a connecting link between the creator and the created. Now, the other aspect of Hasidism is that they truly popularized Kabbalistic theology, and they integrated a sophisticated understanding of emotions, will, and human transformation into religious teachings and practice. They really were the reason that some psychiatrists go back to Kabbalistic myth is that the Hasids were really doing a form of psychological understanding of people before the advent of that part of human knowledge, right? And that Neo-Hasidism is a new era of taking the breadth of Hasidic literature and incorporating it into a modern understanding of gender, halakha, and hierarchy. Most people, if they've encountered Neo-Hasids, have encountered it through the renewal movement. And there are other elements of Jewish life that also are included in the frame of Neo-Hasidism. So if I haven't overwhelmed you, here we begin our text, which makes me remember that I forgot to bring into this room one of the books that I was going to bring, but we'll read it in English. So this section of the Zohar is in most traditional prayer books before, and it's read before the Ark is opened. And it reads in English. Blessed, can someone else actually read this?
I'll read it.
Great, thank you, Carol.
Yeah, well, I'll let everybody watch me read. Aha. Blessed is the name of the Master of the universe. Blessed is your crown and your place. May you favor always be with your people Israel. Show your people salvation of your right hand in your temple. Grant us the gift of your good light and accept our prayers in mercy. May it be your will to prolong our life in goodness. May I be counted among the righteous, so that you will have compassion on me and protect me in all that is mine and all that is your people Israel's. You feed all, you sustain all, You rule over all. Blessed be he before whom and before whose glorious Torah I bow at all times. Wow. Continued. Not in man do I trust, nor in angels do I rely, but on the God of heaven, who is the God of truth, whose Torah is truth, whose prophets speak truth, and who abounds in acts of love and truth. In him I trust, and to his holy and glorious name I offer praises. May it be your will to open my heart to the Torah and to fulfill the wishes of my heart and of the hearts of all your people Israel, for good, for life, and for peace.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So the book that I forgot was my Siddur, to be able to chant you the last paragraph. The beginning of the last paragraph starts, for those of you who have been to a Saturday morning service, or perhaps to a weekday, Monday or Thursday service where the Torah is read, it starts, Be ana rachetz velishme kadisha yakira ana. And I apologize, I need the book to be able to continue reading it, but that is that's done when the ark is open, and then the beginning of the Torah service continues, and the Torahs are taken out, and the person holding the Torah leads the congregation in the chanting of the Shema. So it's a very interesting thing that I mean, I hadn't really read the whole of that before I had heard the chanting of the last portion of the paragraph in more traditional services, and to think about the way in which, even for people who reject most of Kabbalism, that this piece of the Zohar has become integrated into many people's Torah services. I don't know if anyone has any questions or feedback at this point on all that I have explained, or on this piece in particular, but I welcome discussion or points of being overwhelmed.
So within the Zohar, God is seen as he, right? Throughout the whole thing.
Well, so the Zohar has been translated into English with a lot of great commentary by Professor Daniel Matt, and he would say that the Zohar is the beginning of reclaiming the feminine aspects of the divine, because not all of the Sefirot are understood as masculine. And the part of the divine that is in exile with Israel is the Shekhinah, which is the feminine aspect of the divine. There is also an understanding that Bina and Devorah, also on the left side, are female aspects of the divine, and that the point of wisdom cannot be birthed without the womb of Bina. So,
So when we say, in him I trust, and to his holy and glorious name I offer praises, that within my own head, I don't have to think he. I can think
absolutely.
Adonai, or whatever I want to think. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Now, there's also, as with every aspect of Jewish wisdom, there is feminist criticism of the original source texts of Kabbalah. It was definitely written by men in their time, but it has been reclaimed and reinvigorated with a more broadly positive and holistic understanding of the ways in which gender categories can be both used and transformed and ultimately overcome in connection with holiness. Okay, I have a couple other quotes to read with you. So this next one comes from Tomer Devorah, and sorry about that. I'm trying to admit someone. Hold on. The palm tree of Devorah was written by Moshe Cordovero, and he this book is it's part of a larger text that he wrote, but it has often been publicized just by itself, and it is really immutatio Dei. So it connects the 10 sefirot to ways to be good in the world, ways to imitate the divine in order to bring yourself and your community into closer alignment with God. So here is a sample excerpt from Tomer Devorah. A person's forehead, metzvach, should display no harshness. Rather, one should emulate the display of divine willingness, accepting everything. Even though certain people arouse one's anger, he should conciliate them and placate them with goodwill. For this is what God does, placating the powers of severity that prevail in anger. He directs them in goodwill and washes over them with great wisdom, causing the anger to subside, lest it break through its boundaries and cause damage, God forbid. So this is not a revelatory idea. A lot of Jewish ethics is about, has been written about curtailing anger, and also about not and showing humility. So the special space of Tomer Devorah is not so much in the ethical descriptions that it provides, but in the fact that it connects well-known Jewish ethical understandings with the Sefirot. So it was a way to popularize an understanding and really integrate recognizing this map of divine reality as having some kind of connection to lived experience. I also want to say that I had no idea before I started studying that character ethics, virtues, was such an integral part of Jewish knowledge. Before I became a serious student of Judaism, I had really only heard of virtues from a pop culture Christian context. So it was really interesting for me to know that all of this type of explanations also exists within our own tradition, and that they can be beautifully connected to an understanding of God. Because for me, trying to understand an all-powerful, all-knowing God who lets the Shoah happen was really disconnected me from deep belief. And so connecting to this map of metaphysical reality and how to become a better version of myself has transformed me. So I'm curious if anyone had heard of Tomer Devorah before, and what you think of this small bit of text.
Hi, sorry, I've never heard of the Tomer Devorah, but it's just kind of interesting about you using like the forehead. I think so much of our expression is red in our foreheads and our between our eyebrows, and I think that's kind of like an interesting mirror into what's happening inside of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
it's also what. Yeah,
and I love the idea of goodwill and washing over you with great wisdom. It just seems like such a profound. I don't quite know exactly how to how to visualize it, but it just seems like a real powerful symbol or analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. Related to the recognizing people's facial features, it's the reason that the Hebrew idiom for a being without anger is Erecha, which means a long nose, because when you show anger, your nostrils flare.
Plus, also in this time of COVID, you lose the lower face, and what you see are the eyes and the forehead. And not only does the forehead show the energy and the feelings, so do the eyes. And if you smile under your mask, you change your face. And a lot of people walk around with a frown or neutral because of the mask. And I encourage people to put a smile on their mouth behind the mask, which shifts the energy of the face and relaxes the forehead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, it's, I don't know that treating one's anger always works by just turning the other cheek or not resolving it, or, moving on. And, I think that that's the one thing I don't like about this. It's leave it alone and move on, and unresolved stuff can come back. That's all.
Right, absolutely. Okay, I have one more quote for you. This is from Nephesh, which translates to the soul of life. Nephesh is not often studied by modern
Men.
All right. I'm just saying that it is extremely important to the Orthodox movement, because Rav Chaim of Volozhin, in addition to writing this book, created the modern yeshiva movement. And so only the four, it's a series of 4 essays, and over the course of its life, this book, often only the 4th essay was distributed. And part of the reason for that is that the first 3 essays provide a Kabbalistic understanding of why to conform to the 4th essay, which is about focusing on halakha and Torah lishma, studying Torah for its own sake. This is another one of the books that I am writing about for my thesis. And so you can see here, in 2012 was the first time that the whole book became available in English, and it was with the revised edition in 2014. So here is that quote from it. She, the living soul, Nephesh of the worlds, and the powers and the heavenly angels, that all of their ascents and descents and all of their behaviors in every instant are dependent only on the direction of the actions, speech, and thoughts in man's body in each instant. That it was written ascending first and after that descending is because the primary role of man is to first cause each world to ascend from the lower to the higher, and afterwards the energy is drawn from higher to lower. So this is a
what does that mean? That last sentence, what does that mean?
Okay, so before the last sentence, Kabbalists have a deep belief that action, speech, and thought have every one of our action, speech, and thought has meaning, both for us personally and for the world, and more importantly for God. That through this trifold ways that we can interact with the world, we can either bring down more godliness or make more space for evil. And that that our thoughts are extremely powerful because they are the highest level of our interaction with the world. Every word that comes out of our mouth is a form of creating a world, and our actions have physical impact on the world. And so the reason that Kabbalists have an ethical understanding of how they're supposed to act is because they're not a mystical faction that just believes in meditating beyond lived reality. They think that our way of connecting God to reality is through our lived experience, and that we are not souls trapped in a body, but we are on a mission in our body to bring down to by ascending into a connection with God, we bring down the energy of God into the world. And that the energy of God can be seen as the flow of goodness, of grace, of peaceful interaction with one another.
I get that, but that last part, afterwards, the energy is drawn from higher to lower. I mean, you're going up and then you're going down and then you're going up again and down.
So that by us ascending upwards, the energy of God will then be able to flow downwards, that we create the channel that makes the flow of God able to access this world.
And then after that happens, the energy continues to flow. Is that what the last sentence says? Afterwards, the energy is drawn from higher to lower. So once you open the channel, the energy continues to come down. Is that what this is saying?
The connection. Yeah, the connection keeps going. I think part of the confusion is that in addition to the 10 sefirot, the Kabbalists have an understanding of 4 worlds. So the reason that it says each world is that it's ascending within those worlds. So the world of action to creation to formation to connection with the divine. Those are the 4. That's the world that is referred to in that sentence.
And who do we have access to all 4 worlds in this lifetime?
Probably only the greatest mystics would have access to the world closest to the divine, but that through our prayer and our actions, we can move ourselves beyond the world of action into the world of creation, Beriah, and perhaps even beyond that into the world of formation, Yetzirah.
Okay, so sort of a Hindu theme, the levels, right? That kind of thing. Okay.
Previously, when I had only a few slides, people asked a lot more questions, and I was sure that that my slides were going to be more than our time period would allow. But I think that because this topic is so new to so many people, it's harder to formulate a question about it. And I didn't want to overwhelm you by providing too much detail, because I know that in the past, if the majority of our class is a lecture, that turns people off as well. But if there are any aspects of the history of Jewish mysticism or specific ideas within it that you want me to talk about, I'm happy to do so.
How do you teach someone to connect with the spirit?
Well, I think the first thing to ask is how people recognize what's within themselves, and if think about what causes them to act in the way that they do, if they have any moments of silence to check in within themselves. The way that I have been taught has been a combination of Kabbalah and a sort of reformation of psychological understanding. So the use of both positive psychology and Jungian psychology to know that looking towards the good and finding ways of having a good life is important, but also just understanding that we have different aspects within ourselves. I'm not sure about teaching children. I haven't tried in particular beyond my own 2 kids, but for example, Kabbalah connects to a basic Jewish understanding that we have multiple inclinations within us. And these are often divided into the inclination towards goodness and the inclination towards destructiveness. And that inclination towards destructiveness is important and useful in that it helps us to continue living and to create new things, the Yetzer Hara, but that it has to be contained within its space, and it has to be put towards good use. And you have to remember that it might be telling you to do things that are not in your ultimate, that don't ultimately help you. So, for example, you might be overwhelmed by work and life and collapse in front of the television at the end of every day. And that might be a very healing thing for you for a time, but maybe after a time it becomes overwhelming, and you forget yourself beyond being in that vegetative state of enjoying entertainment. And so in order to break free from that cycle, which is being compelled by your Yetzer Hara, you have to have a will towards change. And that will can come from seeking connection with something beyond yourself, which could come in the form of study, or come in the form of meditation. There's a brilliant book on meditating into Jewish prayer that is helpful for framing Jewish prayer as a way into the self beyond normal reality. But in terms of children, just knowing that, that the immediate reaction to things is not necessarily how we want to be, and learning to regulate ourselves into connecting towards the person who hasn't been confronted with that emotional trigger is helpful. And that, for example, the reason that my family says a blessing before every meal is as a gratitude practice, and that expressing gratitude is the first step in recognizing that the world exists beyond your own wants and needs.
Can I ask a question? I apologize, first of all, for being late, but I apparently have relatives that don't understand time frame. But I remember a few years back when like Madonna and some of these, movie stars were into Kabbalah, the mysticism and stuff. Yeah. Why was it that they were doing that? And I understand. Well, I guess I don't understand. Like, I thought since it belongs to Judaism, it's like, why would they just pick that part out and not, what was the big, does my question make sense?
It totally does. I mean, I think that it speaks to the eternal seeking of connection, and in particular to the abilities of particular teachers of Kabbalah to reach particular people. So I know that the Kabbalah Center on the west side of Los Angeles has a particularly large reach beyond just the Jewish community, and has shared aspects of it with many people. in terms of Madonna, so one of her most popular albums is called Ray of Light, and that is that in itself is a symbol from Kabbalah, that the ray of light, the kav, is that divine flow that comes through the sphirot into our reality, and that even before scientists understood the many variations of ways that you can describe light, Jewish mystics have always recognized light as a particularly important frame of reference for making space for the holy within our lives. That it's not just about being able to see, but that it's about being able to see within and beyond. So the reason that so many of our our holidays and our remembrances connect to light, it is because of that, and that the soul of man is the light of God. So that when you meditate on a yahrzeit candle, there really is a connection to the soul that whom you have lit it for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the Kabbalah, do they say where you go when you die?
Well, I have another presentation about that. Yes. So there are many understandings of the soul's journey after life. But it is the Kabbalistic understanding of the soul's journey that created our current customs around taking care of the body of a deceased loved one, which is called a mate, after they have passed, and including our need to bury it as quickly as possible so as not to confuse it, and that the soul has trouble separating from their worldly life, and so we say that they travel between their grave and their loved one and their home that they had lived in, which is why we traditionally encourage people the people that are sitting Shiva to sit Shiva in that person's home for the 7 days, and that in the process of our mourning, we help them to understand that they have passed, and that we set them free to go on the rest of their journey on that 7th day when we walk around our community and move back into our regular life. Not all Kabbalah, it's like any part of Judaism, not all people agree on all of it. But there is a concept of Gilgulim, which is the Jewish understanding of reincarnation. It means rolling, and that it's another self-reinforcing mechanism, because the understanding is connected to keeping halakha, and that by keeping halakha, you help the aspects of your ascend to higher realms, and you purify your soul. And that once the soul has been purified of all earthly transgressions, then it is able to fully connect back into the soul of souls and does not need to return to the material world. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there's a whole big philosophy around all this.
There is, yeah. And the gate of reincarnation is Sha'ar HaGilgulim is a book that has been recently translated into English, but it is difficult to get into, but not just because it's mystical or talking about something that we don't often think about, but because it is so rooted in halachic practice, and it's a bit repetitive, and it just keeps reinforcing this idea that you have to keep halakha in order to purify your soul.
As we bring Elijah the prophet and open the door for him to come in, is that a sign of validating this whole concept of the spirit?
Yes, it's also connecting us back to core messianic ideas in Judaism. One of the things that was hardest for me to get my mind around when I was studying Jewish history is how important the idea of the Messiah has been to the Jewish understanding of the world. That Elijah is coming to bring about not just peace on earth, but the end of history, the end of time, and to make the world to come become the world that we are all in. Yeah, it connects back both to the understanding of spirit, but also to even older traditions within Judaism.
If we wanted to, oh, sorry. If
Go
we
ahead.
if we wanted to like read up on it, what book would you recommend?
It sort of depends what you want to read up on, like what aspect is most interesting to you. If putting it into practice is most interesting to you, R.A. Kaplan has a book on Jewish meditation that is about meditating into Jewish prayer. That's really good. In this realm, Roger Kamenetz's book, The History of Last Night's Dream, he's also the author of The Jew and the Lotus.
Hold it up again.
Let me take off my blurring so that it's easier to see. Oh, no, that's not the one I wanted. Hold on, sorry. So if you're interested in dream work, the History of Last Night's Dream by Roger Kamenetz is a good one. If you're interested in the way to understand the Torah from this point of view, this is an incredible book called The Aura of Torah. And this provides short Kabbalistic Hasidic commentaries on the Torah portions, and it was translated by Rabbi Larry Tabak. And I will also provide link. I will put a blog post on my blog to post a link for these things. And then finally, the other one that's in print that I would recommend that I had been holding up is The Essential Kabbalah, The Heart of Jewish Mysticism by Daniel Matt.
You know, I tried to read that. It is so dense.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the one that a lot of people recommend. There's also Rabbi Steinschultz wrote the 13 Petaled Rose, and people have found that to be it's, you know, he has a more poetic way of writing that's been helpful to people. You know, the other thing is it's not in print, but it's available for purchase as a used book. There's a book called Kabbalah by Gershom Shalom, and it is a collection of the essays that he wrote for the Jewish Encyclopedia as well as other places. So they were written with laymen in mind, and I think that it is a pretty easy to understand book. Definitely that book and I can't remember the name of the book that's sitting on my table. There's another Shalom book that's not major trends in Jewish mysticism, which is totally not for a first-time reader, but yeah, it's hard because for me, the most useful books that I've read are academic books. That I've, you know, I learned a lot of my first foray into understanding all of this was attending a synagogue with a rabbi who was teaching it. And then when I wanted to learn about it, I wanted to learn from you know, go back to the sources kind of a framework. So, oh, and then the other thing is that this is also out of print. It's a book called Jewish Mystical Testimonies by Louis Jacobs. And that it's just, let me show it to you. It's a fascinating book because, you know, there aren't a lot of shared stories of people's actual experiences with mysticism that people they are fearful of being labeled heretics. And there's just been a very strong Jewish bent for not sharing these things publicly. So, so that's a good one as well. And also Chavruta. If there's ever been an aspect of Jewish knowledge that cries out for having a study buddy, someone to bounce ideas off of, it's really going into this area of Jewish understanding that we have been kept so far away from for so long. The other thing I can say is that Daniel Matt offers a community Zohar class that's offered on Zoom, and you can sign up for the next iteration of it. You can pay to get access to earlier sections of it. He started it from the beginning of his translation of the Zohar and keeps going through. So it's been a couple of years that it's been going on. And it having someone to teach the text to you page by page is a helpful resource. Trying to think if there's any other online research. Really playing around with it and finding a way into it that that feels most comfortable to you will help you to see where your next teacher in the subject is. For me, the reason that I chose to not focus on Hasidic writers for my thesis, not because I think that they are brilliant, and I think that they are an extremely important way to understand integrating mystical frameworks into your life and into an understanding of the self that can be really expansive. It's been a way for me to understand the process of living beyond the context of being in a therapist room, that it provides a spiritual framework for it that is unique in the history of human civilization. So that has been an important thing for me personally. But so the reason that I didn't focus on Hasidic masters is because they were reading someone before them before they wrote their books. And so my life's work is beginning with this thesis where I am reviewing Tomer Devorah, Mesilat Yesharim, which is the path of the upright. It is a book that is mostly understood as solely being an ethical work, but it was written by a mystic. So I'm drawing out the spiritual aspects of that work. It's frustrating to most people after the first few chapters because it elevates an ascetic understanding of how to live the best life. In any case, and then the final book that I'm working with is Nephesh, which is probably beyond the scope of most people who are just starting out because it compiles all of the known Kabbalistic sources and the known rabbinic sources before it in order to make its point. Yes, Carol.
All this research, no, Carol. Unmute.
Go ahead, Jackie. I'll go after you.
Has all this understanding and learning changed the way you approach your personal prayer?
Oh, yeah. So there are, I mean, it is completely transformed my personal prayer. So in that it's deepened what was already there. I always, prayer was my first entry point into Judaism, and particularly the singing aspect of prayer. That, you know, I started going to services as a child, and I had no idea what I was reading. I mean, I even had a trouble, even going, I would go to Hebrew school 2 to 3 times a week and still couldn't read Hebrew until I went to Camp Ramah. So, so I went to Hebrew school at a time when the education wasn't there, right? But the sound of Hebrew and the chant of Judaism connected to my soul, and I didn't have any words for that. And learning this aspect of Jewish wisdom is what allowed me to connect to the poetry of our people and really sink more deeply into it. There's a line in the traditional morning prayers, which I have trouble remembering in its original form because I translated it for myself into feminine verbs. But in the way that I chant it, Le'olam tehei adam tirei shamayim b'seter uvgaloi. A person should always have reverence for the heavens in private and in public, or reverence for the divine in private and in public. Moda al ha'emet, and acknowledge the truth. Moda al ha'emet, ha'emet. The seter emet ulvava, and speak the truth in his heart, or in her heart. So for me, and I created a chant for that. For me, it's about recognizing what is most important in the world. That my concept of divinity is not something that I'm always able to connect to. I aspire to the highest levels of goodness and truth and beauty, and that I want to help bring that into the world, and that I want to, you know, it's also part of the reason I wear a yarmulke, that I want to recognize who I am trying to be when I am alone and when I am out in the world, and that I want to speak that truth, acknowledge that truth first, and then speak it through everything that I do. And so really that pull towards understanding that truth on a deeper level is what pulled me into seminary, and what pulls me into continuing to learn this for the rest of my days. Regardless of what I do for a living, this truth has already transformed my life and will continue to transform my life. It's also about the cycle of our holidays, that our holiday cycle goes with the rhythm of our own life, our own spiritual journey. The darkness of winter, we have the candles of Hanukkah. The opening of spring, we welcome in with fun and joy, and we party together for Purim, and then we acknowledge that we need to break free for physical freedom in Passover, and that being physically free is not the end of our journey, that we have even more work to do in order to become spiritually free. And so the counting of the Omer and connecting into the Sfirot allow me to meditate into what makes me spiritually free and come to the point of revelation on Shavuot. So all of it, there is no part of my Jewish practice that isn't infused with this understanding. On the other hand, I totally respect that some people are rationalists and are wary of any of this language, and I don't need to shout it from the rooftops. I can allow it to be what inspires me and help other people find their own way into depth and meaning. Carol.
Oh, hi. So I'm still stuck on, even though I've been listening from like the second or third paragraph when you talked about the vessels being filled with spirit. Was it spiritual or messages or something? So I'm assuming that spiritual messages were, I'm not going to say made up, because I was like, okay, so it has to mean something, but in order to get it to mean something, it is a bigger thing. I'm not going to go crazy on it, but that's just something that just stuck in my head. And I know there's a lot of Judaism and a lot of things that can't really just firstly be explained. They can be explained, and they could be explained in a lot of different ways. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And how you take it in. And to me, mysticism maybe isn't the word I should use, but I always think it's kind of with spiritualism, that like when I have like, I knew that was going to happen, or there's something where you just know, or there's something that's there. Yet in the beginning of this class, not the real beginning, but in the beginning of the class, they're like, there are unanswered questions. There's always going to be unanswered. These things or can't be explained, but there are explanations when you reach it, but it may not be the explanation, but it's the explanation. That sounds very wordy, I know, but I know I'm not really understanding the whole bounty of the scope, but I see when you talk about how you've connected to it, that that bridge there is really wonderful. It's like finding, the Pandora's box. You open the box and you're delving in, and it's helping you. And I think that that's a wonderful way to do it. And I think that instead of you just have to do the work if you want to understand it, or you can just be a layman and like me, who may or may not read a book, because sometimes books are just like Jackie said about one of the books, she's like, that was so hard, if it's the book has too many things that are just like, that's over my head, I get a little lost. However, but I think that the fact that I'm saying all these things means I've kind of been processing a little, so that's all good. Baruch Hashem.
Amen. I mean, I think that for most people, the way into mysticism isn't a book, but it's an experience of it's a prayer experience that is infused with this understanding, or it's a meditation experience. I happen to meditate through prayer. I'm not a meditation leader, but I try to infuse my prayer leadership with this flow of holiness. And then, in terms of hard books, I read a book about the shadow, which was a compilation of essays, mostly by people in the psychological realm of, and it was so dense that it took me like 3 years to read it. But by allowing myself the time to read it, it helped me to understand this concept of the Yetzer Hara, and deepen myself. So even, I mean, I can throw 500 books at you, but even if it's just one thing that speaks to you, it's a good thing to have. I think that having, especially if it's something that connects into something that's general Judaism, right? Like, I don't know that just reading the Bible is that meaningful to most people. And so when I can share a commentary on the Bible that I think can help open it up in a new way, that's more exciting to me than maybe just like the intellectual history part of it. Yeah.
One of the things that's most interesting to me is how much time and attention and energy is spent on gratitude, kindness, and giving.
Yeah.
I never realized how much energy that's part of our religion. And it really is highlighting it for me, that path is really important.
Absolutely. The other interesting thing for me is just the way communal politics is eternal. So some people wonder why there was such a strong opposition to the Hasidim. They were known as mitnagdim, which literally means the opponents. And so they all believed in halachic Judaism, but they put different emphasis. So some people will say that that their main part of the reason that they had such polemical discourse and were trying to excommunicate Hasidim is because they were putting too much emphasis on kavanot, on intention, and they weren't getting to their prayer services at the legally required time. Now, the way that a historian has written about it is that actually what was going on was a disruption of communal norms. So when Hasidic Rebbes became popular, people would come to them from long distances and would support them with their tzedakah and get blessings from the Rebbe. And this process of transformed the economic reality of Judaism in the lands that the Hasidic lived in. So so they were disrupting the flow from the regular forms of rabbinic authority to themselves, and that was ultimately a larger source of contention than their philosophical disagreements. And I think that knowing that, and also knowing that like people started new synagogues because they wanted the opportunity to have the honor of an aliyah. That part of the way that a synagogue would keep itself going is that people would give donations in response to having aliyot. And if you were a tailor, you wouldn't be able to give as high of a donation as the elite of your town. So the tailors made their own synagogue where they were all able to participate fully in the service. And I just found learning that level of detail of how human we have been throughout our existence positive, because the issues that we face in modern Judaism are not as new as we think that they are.
That's hi, it's me. That's interesting because you're saying that the people who couldn't make the same amount, were they like looked on, frowned on, or was it not just they just felt like, okay, we don't meet we're not the same as you yet. We want to do this, but we want to do it in a way where we feel we are giving the most, and
or just have the opportunity to participate. I mean, it's sort of the way that in some synagogues, the big machers are the ones that get all of the honors. And so the other interesting thing to know about the time before emancipation, so before Jews became full-fledged citizens in European countries, they were legally owned by the rulers of where they lived. And those rulers conferred upon the Jewish authorities the ability to tax Jewish citizens and to self-regulate the Jewish community. So in addition to the ways that their synagogues were formed, there was communal charity, and there was an understanding that you would that all Jews in your community were taken care of. Now, it was a beautiful thing. It was unique in its time. And it also caused problems because the Jewish leaders of certain towns would keep other Jews from residing in them because they didn't want to increase the number of poor people that they had to sustain with their communal coffers. So there was that level of dispute amongst people. But this idea of tzedakah doesn't translate as charity. It really is about justice, and that we have an obligation to take care of ourselves, to take care of others within our community.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of for one of our sisterhood little events, we watched this. I know this is way off topic, but this film on Boyle Heights when it was Jewish. It's such a great film. The other BH, Boyle Heights, but how they were there to help the community. So yes, you think, oh, this may be a new, oh, we're together and we help our community. And I'm sure that this is in the Latino communities and then the African-American community, we help each other, but you have to get it together and be there and help one another, because if not, who else is going to help you? And that, I think that the fact that they were able to do this really helped them thrive until they found out about the West Side and they split. So I don't know if it's the same anymore, but sure, within your community, and it's like I say about TBD, without having much family or whatever, I have my temple community, and that is just wonderful because we can help each other along the way. And that is one of the best things about being a temple member, I found, is that there really is help. Even when you don't think you need it, somebody is there to help you out. So even if it's the kind words from our clergy, we appreciate it.
Yeah. It is an honor to be with you on this journey of life.
Right.
Yeah, it's really been fantastic, and I just really wouldn't have known that this type of class and just having the time to come to it to learn a little more, a little Bissel or something, has been quite an eye opener. So it's not a bad thing at all.
So wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Oh, sure. From the heart.
Yeah.
So what's the topic in 3 weeks? I hate to move on, but I need to move on.
No, that's fine. The topic in 3 weeks is emancipation and the beginning and denominations. So how we came to be modern Jews that see ourselves in all these separate categories, perhaps with a particular emphasis on Reform Judaism, because that question has come up before about the origins of Reform Judaism. It is a fascinating thing to know that Reform Judaism was the first denomination to begin, and then others became after that. Yeah.
I want to say I'm very impressed by your knowledge.
Thank you.
Oh.
What about I just after the next one, there's 1 or 2 classes, and what's the date?
So we are scheduled for March 26th, and I believe it's April 6th. And the final class is what does this all mean for us? And putting it together in terms of bringing forward what, the vitality of Judaism into the next iteration of Temple Beth David.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well,
So
you gave us a lot to think about. You gave us a lot to think about, or at least that's where my head's going. So wonderful.
Right.
Thank you.
So
you.
if there aren't other questions before you all go, I want to end with that chant that that I created for this understanding of reverence of heaven and reverence of God and acknowledging the truth in our heart. Leolam te Adam Terei Shamayim Beseter Uvgalui Umoda Emet Vedoveret Emet Bilvava. Shabbat Shalom.